Good you are watching Xirtus. This is because Xirtus makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Xirtus for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Xirtus, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Xirtus. Your friends will come to like Xirtus, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Xirtus. See, that was easy.
So long as I'm in this Oval Office.
Hi, everyone.
I just thought it would be cool if we started with just Kurt for a second. Here, Kurt, tell me.
I'm telling them about something. I'm curious as to who wrote that opening, because that was actually a pretty sick opening, in my opinion. I really like that one. Whoever, if that sounds like a band, that doesn't sound like AI, but it honestly sounds really sick, and I never heard that intro before. So yeah, it sounds like a band. If it was a band, they did a really good job. So yeah, I can do a monologue now. Yeah.
What's up?
What's up?
All right, what about this? Is this real?
No, that's AI.
Yeah, because they sing perfectly, so it sounds too close to pop. I could make them not sing perfectly. But hey, Seth, how are you?
What's up? I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here. Feeling great, actually.
Dude, what have you
How
been up
about you,
to?
man?
I'm alive.
Oh, man. Dude, I've been doing lots of awesome stuff on my blog and podcasting and stuff. I got a call out by Mr. Vervaeke himself, which I'm pretty happy about.
How'd that go down?
Do you know John Vervaeke?
Not really, but here, let me pull him up.
I like to call John Vervaeke the atheist version of Jordan Peterson. He's the yin yang of Jordan Peterson. He the way, one way I think about it, Jordan Peterson, he's very religious, but he's simultaneously respectful of science. Vervaeke is very scientific, but respectful of religion. That's kind of the yin yang type of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
What's he say about after? Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. He's built this After Socrates YouTube series where he's he's trying to build he's trying to use a philosophic foundation to build a rational type of spirituality So like kind of a spirituality that like atheists can get on board with without feeling like they're swallowing a bunch of bullshit. You know what I mean?
So okay,
And
give me like a description. Evangelize to me this
give
atheist.
you like the sell pitch of this
some
atheistic religion.
Epistemologize at me.
Oh, okay.
Epistemologize.
So he basically appeals to like the wisdom of the sages. So like Christ could be considered the sage of Christianity. Socrates is the sage of philosophy, and like Buddha, the sage of Buddhism. And he's saying like these sages, they've got like a way of being. There's like a mode, a style of existence. If you read about Socrates, he has this style, and like we can learn from his style, we can embody his style, and we can like elevate ourselves by like operating at like that level. You know what I mean? So it's a way to kind of level up yourself by following someone else's example.
Like, okay, so in general, you would just follow a sage's advice, but why do you follow Socrates? Or is he saying after Socrates to find new sages? Or
yeah, the whole after thing is he basically says the word after signifies 4 different things. Like in time, like on a timeline, all of us are after Socrates in time. And so it's kind of a historical approach at looking at how the history is relevant to us. Another meaning of after is like when you're hunting, right? If you're hunting a gazelle, you are after the gazelle. I'm going after you, right? And so what he's saying is we need to treat Socrates like something that we are hunting. Like we desire to obtain his example. And so we're like pursuing Socrates in order to obtain what he has to offer.
so what is it that Socrates has to offer, like in terms of epistemology or stoicism, or what is it about a Socratic lifestyle?
So like in my opinion, the most important philosophic principle is the dialectic. And Socrates kind of like he kind of invented the dialectic. Like you could debate that, and he like fleshed out, there's different types of dialectic. So Socrates invented the Socratic dialectic. And what it is, it's a style of conversation where you level up your ideas, you go deeper into a topic, and you become more wise with mixing skepticism into your discussion. Does that make sense? So for example, like this is a way to think about Socrates' style, right? Socrates, he'd go into like the marketplace of Athens, Greece, and he'd be like, I don't know anything. I am such a fool. I really wish someone could teach me something so I could be less ignorant. Does anyone in this marketplace know anything at all? And they would be so generous to teach me, right? So he's approaching reality with humble, like an epistemic humility. Like you don't know, like I'm humble enough to know that I'm ignorant, right? That's his vibe. And then like he like bumps into like a judge, like, you know, they have courts and judges or whatever. And he's like, oh, Mr. Bob, you are a judge. You must know something about justice. Surely you know something about justice. Can you teach me about justice? And Mr. Bob is like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I know all about justice. Yeah, I'll teach you. And Socrates is like, what is justice? And like that begins the paradox, because what you find in the Socratic dialogues is whenever you try to define things, it's like the essence is so much more rich and complex than a superficial definition. So Mr. Bob will give a superficial definition. He's like, do what is right and return things that are borrowed. That's justice. And then Socrates, he like starts to dig deeper. He like pokes some holes. And then like Mr. Bob is like, ah, crap, you're right. My definition isn't good enough because, yeah, your counterexample just destroyed my definition. So now we got to rebuild the definition of justice. And it's an iterative process of we build a paradigm, we poke some holes, we fix the paradigm, poke some more holes, and you get this growing epistemology, right?
Legit. Kurt, what do you think about Stoicism?
It's one of those,
and Socrates too,
and Socrates. Okay. I'll start with Stoicism. I like Marcus Aurelius in Meditations, which like a lot of people read, but I like it. But Stoicism, one of those things. It's like I think I typecast it a little bit. It's like one of those things that women on OnlyFans read about so that they feel intellectual. That's what I think about Stoicism. But there's a couple other things like that. It's like it's good to take its. At the time it was like created, I think it was a little bit like radicalized almost. Like it's good to have the perspective of Stoicism, kind of like a lot of other different philosophical perspectives. But if it's the only perspective you have, you're going to be a very one-dimensional. So fortunately, I don't think people are very one-dimensionally stoic. In today's landscape, it's been quite a long time. But there's with concerning Socrates was kind of badass, I think, well, I mean, in the sense that I think there are some parallels between Socrates and Kierkegaard, or it's pronounced Kierkegaard. I'm not even sure. I just read words and I say them.
Call him Kierkegaard, just call him Kierkegaard because it's
Kierkegaard. Yeah, Kierkegaard I like a lot. Well, basically, Kierkegaard also died in open rebellion of the Danish church. He did a lot of Christian writing, of course, but like basically his father died. He's like, all right, I can't disappoint my father anymore. And then he just like went on a tirade against the church for the rest of his life. And basically with how, not Christianity, but how Christianity was being practiced, which I think is a message a lot of people can get behind. But and so Socrates died in the same way, not an open rebellion of religion, but pretty much in the society that he was being convicted in. He was being convicted of corrupting the youth.
Direct consequence of democracy itself.
Basically, yeah. We could talk a lot of. I'm not even a big fan of democracy anymore. Just because I think, yeah, it's majority rules, and often majority rules is just another type of oppression, and I think that's one political problem we have is democracy, and you can't solve democracy with dictatorship. It's just like, how do you dissolve those authorities?
Everything is itself, and it's like the Dark Crystal, where like they broke the universe in half, and then the only way to get it back is integration. So like Marxism is a form of capitalism. It's just a sustainable automation where the consumers participate in the obligations of the machine that's running for their benefit for the goods and services. And democracy is just a dictatorship where the majority oppress the minority instead of the minority oppressing the majority, right? So it's an inverse, but it's the same mechanism of control, and all rights are removed because they're up to discussion.
So is there a form of government that does not reduce to some type of oppression?
Probably direct anarchy with sovereignty, but the problem is that people could still reduce it by ending anarchy. If you sold your sovereignty for a social contract where you say, okay, I'll submit to your rule and reduce my sovereignty if you have benefits that outweigh, like, I'm free in nature, but I have no money, so I'll sell you my livelihood in exchange for a castle or for, house.
I'm like something. Nature, like the animal kingdom is pretty anarchic, and there's like oppression everywhere in the animal kingdom.
No, I see it as a divine balance everywhere in the animal kingdom. It's like you could see as the wolf as oppressing the deer, but really it's like I think there's a mediated process that not everyone sees. It was like, yeah, the deer has that urge to get away, but I think there's just kind of like the semi-conscious force of like when the deer is caught, it's just like, all right, you got me. That's just the way things go. I'm gonna die now.
Deer are just these giant rats that harbor diseases that we've proliferated by growing more and more grass everywhere. So now there's this grass that just we've just harbored these villains that are gonna. The next plague, I think, could come from deer. I mean, not just limes.
Oh, we
I'm-
had. Go ahead. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I'm just envisioning some like Marxist wolves that are like, these deers are oppressing us. They're not giving us their substance. We're starving over here. How dare the deer withhold themselves from us? We gotta seize the means of deer production.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
what about you know, in nature? You read that book, The Omnivore's Dilemma, and the idea of the birds and the bees and the corn and flowers. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
There's this idea that bees will be pulling out the pollen, right? And they're the drones, so they're the slaves essentially. But the slaves get to be free all day, right? Because the queen is forced to just breed all the time in this prison. So
Yeah.
inverse already, but now you've got these free drones that are slaves that have to go return pollen, and they find a tree, you know, and this tree's just got cherry blossoms, huge, and then it starts. All the bees come and they take all the cherry blossom nectar. They take all of the pollen, and then they leave, essentially thinking, "Wow, we've exploited the hell out of this tree," you know. And then the tree is thinking to himself, God, you know, like as these bees are going out and dropping its pollen and producing more and fertilizing other trees, thinking to itself, God, I've totally got these bees. I've totally exploited these bees. They think to God that they got me, right? So there's this constant trick in nature, right, that's happening. The other one that's good is corn, because corn has convinced humanity to like unknown levels to proliferate itself, starting with being a grass. We cover our lawns in grass, and then we've evolved grass into corn and maize in South America over thousands of years. Look, a big part of human civility is that we were able to evolve corn, you know, to genetically engineer corn in primitive times. And then now we've genetically modified corn, and we're making corn plastics and corn diesels and corn ethanols and corn, you know, we're killing nature so that we can plant more corn with subsidies. It's like corn is winning. You know what I mean? Like corn is the, I don't know. So there's it's just confusing to say like which thing exploited the other thing better, because it is a system of reciprocity, and it might be long-term versus short-term reciprocity.
So, yeah, that's not to just like my way of thinking. That's not to justify political systems necessarily. It's to.
I'm putting you down here because you're not wearing pants. That just seems.
I'm wearing pants.
Well, they're nicer. They're like soft. You know, they're pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're like in a full like PJ like uniform, or is that just like plaid? I like it. I'm a fan.
Yeah, it's my plaid PJs. I am not dressed for success. I'm dressed to podcast. But Andreas will be right back, I'm sure. But what I was saying about those systems, I guess, I'll talk to Seth. Like that can be the basis of how we think about, essentially what Andreas was saying, how we think about how different systems relate to one another. And so if we think about philosophically what is freedom, what's the basis for freedom, happiness, meaning, all of those things, I do think we have to integrate all of those things into thinking, okay, what is the best political system moving from here? One thing that's very popular among a lot of nature workers is a lot of people know that wolves and pumas, or mountain lions, they were driven out of their natural habitats by human intervention. And for a variety of reasons, one was like farming, like wolves can be a nuisance for farming. But the thing is, like, we mess up ecosystems all the time. So when, for example, in Florida, there doesn't really exist. There's not very many mountain lions. There are a few, but not very many. A lot of the predators were driven out, and so there was a huge explosion of the deer population after that. So essentially what happened was the deer population exploded so much and ate so much vegetation that it was too much. They ate too much of the vegetation, and then there was like a population of 100,000 deer that then just starved to death. You know, maybe starvation.
Good.
Yeah.
Deer. Honestly, I don't know why cows always get it from the UFOs. It should be deer. Honestly, I wanted to wear this in solidarity with you. See, like, there's no reason that you're dressed for success. You know what I mean? If I had those pants with this jacket, anybody wearing this would be they'd have like a magical day. We put like our outfit together on Seth, and he just goes out and just wins the lottery all day.
I just need a little bit of snake oil to sell.
Dude, so snake oil is real. That's the thing. We need to get a bunch of like actually. So did you ever buy Chinese snake oil while you were in Taiwan, Seth, or did you find out about it?
Say that again. You glitched for a second.
Chinese snake oil in Taiwan, because apparently there's real snake oil.
I ate snake. I didn't come across snake oil. No.
Well, if you ate snake, then one would suppose that the 20 or so % fat that is rare, but in serpents, it would, you would have had some of that fat, unless they completely remove the fat, which I doubt because it's China. So if you had the fat, oil is fat, you had a snake oil. See what I'm saying?
Am a shyster.
Yeah, this is the deal. Snake oil is a good thing. There's a difference between selling fake snake oil. I think that's the real issue. It got to the point where you could never even get any snake oil anymore, so it all became fake. But early snake oil was probably like a big deal because it's probably really good for you to get like reptile fat.
Okay, so I want to go back to what American Time Machine was saying. So, should I call you that, or should I call you by your real name?
You can call me Kurt. You can call me Cash Machine. That was an insult someone used, but I like it. So
can I call you like Kurt Guard? That'd be like
okay. Hey, okay.
Right.
Kurt Guard. So yeah, like you're talking about like the deers in Florida that were like going like starving and whatever, and that's kind of an interesting point about just ecosystems in general. But Daniel Schmattenberger, he talks about this kind of like symbiosis, right? Coevolution. When things evolve together, they kind of like have this symbiotic effect where they kind of help each other, right? It's like if I eat you, then you don't starve, right? It's kind of a weird type of symmetry where like you don't eat yourself into extinction, right? If the deers just like destroy the forest, then maybe the deer goes extinct. But if the wolf, like eats up the deer, then the deer can't extinct themselves. So it's like predation is extinction insurance. Isn't that beautiful? That's so beautiful.
As far I like my political understandings, I guess, have been changing. They're changing all the time, not radically. Like I've been like somewhat anarchist for quite some time now, which is what all the cool kids do, But like as far as our like right now, the middle class, we complain a little bit that the middle class is disappearing in the U.S. and most people would say that is a bad thing. And while I do want there to be a middle class, like ideologically, I do want there to be a middle class, but at the same time, I look at other things. It's like we live in a democracy, and when you have democracy, democracy essentially necessitates that, in my opinion, fiat currency will be the standard. Because in a democracy, you try to make as many people happy as possible. It's essentially you get forms of populism, and so you try to do that with the federal budget. In order to make as many people happy as possible with a minimal budget, you're going to have a currency that you can just create essentially out of thin air, so you can cover all your budgets. So because of that, that's going to lower essentially inflate prices over time, and that's going to shove out the middle class. That's always what happens. That's what's going to happen in the future. And when I look at that,
is this all a metaphor? The deer, I get it now. Sorry.
Thank you. So it's a combination of those things of trying to make everyone happy. That's honestly working against us in some ways, but also there's the aspect of like I see consumer spending in the U.S. and I'm grateful that I spent some time out of the U.S. and that gives you a perspective on how other people spend their money. And some people just don't spend because other countries don't have any money. But they live their lives anyway. So that gives you perspective of what's important. Why do Americans buy, I don't know, like, why do we buy gas station food, eat half of it, and throw the other half away? That I think those type of things are kind of pretty common practice. Like we buy a lot of crap we don't need. People put it on credit cards, which is the worst thing you can do if you don't pay it off every month. A lot of people just get in a credit card because that's just what you do, and that's just objectively a waste of money that you put back in the banks. It's like someone to me, that almost seems like a form of natural selection. If someone's like not intelligent enough to realize I should not pay 20% interest on this, and then that money goes right back to the authority that it came from, essentially, because we also have a corporate turkey. I'm not. Yeah, essentially, I'm against the
authority. Sounds a lot like corporate turkey. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sounds like you're making like the capitalism slavery argument, that it's like the people that know how to play capitalism are the masters, and the people that don't know how to play the game of capitalism, they're just getting puppeteered by the bankers and whatnot, and they're just working to pay the debt to.
Yeah, but how long is capitalism going to be so evolutionarily, there was a point where you had to like kill people in order to succeed, and that genetically became associated with epigenetically became associated with the male gender. You know what I mean? So this is your Jordan Peterson lobster thing. But how long does this stuff last for, and how long will it be relevant? It might be that because of capitalism, we're changing biology, genetics, and all the rules, because this is not, you don't have to be the strongest, you can be the cleverest, and that's always been evolutionarily the thing. You get to figure out how to be you don't have to be as strong as a mastodon, you have to be more clever than a mastodon, So as time, you don't have to be more strong than a man, you have to be more clever than a man, right? So at a certain point, we're going to get to a point in civilization where what's the new mode if capitalism isn't the mode?
So like this whole paradigm that Kurt's building out, it just seems to like feed into the Marxist narrative, right? The Marxist narrative is like capitalism, if you leave it to its own devices, it's going to polarize society into the people who know how to game it and the people who don't, and they just get screwed, and they just get screwed more and more until like they're miserable. And if they're miserable enough, they're like, screw the system, we're going to do a revolution. And it's like, now we got a bloodbath on our hands. It's like, great. The greed like turned into this cycle of violence, and that doesn't lead anywhere.
There's enough preconditions set up predicting generational wealth gaps to like zombie proofing. I don't forget if we talked about this last time. Did we talk about zombies last time? This idea that every city, if you look up the city planners who design your schools or your libraries, and your prisons and your parking structures, they're all the same guys and gals, because, and everything in between, because they're building one kind of architecture, they're going to build another kind of architecture. And if you wanted to see, like in Katrina, use of Greyhound bus stations with chain link fence just wrapped around them and very quickly turned into human processing facilities, right? So if there's a collapse of any kind, cities are zombie proofed. They're ready to go. And I don't think that they're going to be in such a circumstance. I mean, very few people, there's enough people, maybe, like I've talked to some people that believe that there's enough ammunition rebuilding chambers and all that. But I think that most Americans aren't a part of that. And so we're going to see maybe like a week's worth of ammunition in most guns in America anyway. And they're not armor-piercing rounds. Like, people don't have America can cause a lot of trouble. They can blow a lot of things up. Like, people cause a lot of suffering. But I don't think I think you'd also stop a lot of that, because the government's so good at knowing where everyone is and what they're doing that they've kind of clamped down if there's a societal collapse. Like, we've had several examples also of engineered catharsis, like Occupy movements and things like that. Like, they can take the energy and then they can honeypot it and study it and know who's involved. I don't know. It's just important to consider.
So what happens when the military splits in half and the military joins the revolution?
That's basically Texas. Texas would be the first state to do that.
Yeah, you can say the citizens aren't going to do a successful Marxist revolution until half the military joins them. Then it's like, oh shit, now we're dealing with real firepower. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think the problem with the U.S., I guess you could say it's the problem, but like I don't see that really happening in the near future. Maybe the long term, but like right now, it's just like we're still too lost in the political binary of like, I mean, currently it's Trump versus Biden, but it's always, one side versus the other side is like, oh, which side has the better argument? But really, yeah, they're just on the same team. You know, it's so
I
it really has to
I just
be
had an epiphany.
anti-federalist. Oh, go ahead.
I just had an epiphany. Like one thing that's really bothered me, or like it's been on my mind, is like Trump and Trump and Biden, these two octogenarian old ass like candidates. Like, why are we having these crappy out of touch candidates? It's like maybe that's the point. Like if they give us like really bad options, then there's like nothing to fight over. It's like, I don't care who wins, they both suck, and then that appeases the tensions, right? It's like, neither of these guys are worth dying for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's an element of like the whole spectacle, the society of the spectacle, and there, like really the politics are just a form of sport. So it's the form of sport that satiates people, but still distracts them from what's going on. Yeah, I mean, there are many great things about the U.S., and I like to highlight those. It's like if you choose to take advantage of certain things in the U.S., it can be really great. But like, no one person or no society exists really in a vacuum. So I think people still behave very tribalistic in many ways, and we don't even realize it. But the most important thing for an individual is to be accepted by the tribe, and I think there's many instances where we don't set up that type of communal acceptance for people and for people on the small level. And I think that's the bad thing about watching nationalized television or nationalized politics or sports. Those people are so disconnected from people in general. Like the chances of you actually meeting and having a full conversation with your favorite athlete or with the president or with a lot of your representatives, it's very low. Like it's very hard to feel an actual authentic connection with those people. So yeah, I'm just very skeptical about what those things offer. I guess you could say the U.S. system, like people have a lot of relative safety and stability in many ways in many parts of the U.S. But that's kind of just due to the combination of the power that we've accumulated. It doesn't tell us anything about what direction we're headed. And so I would say in many ways, the direction that we're headed, it isn't necessarily a spiritually fulfilling one, I would say. I don't think a lot of people are feeling quite fulfilled right now. But you look at a lot of major societies like China, like the self-reports of like things like chronic pain or like emotional pain or going on, having general troubles. Yeah, it seems to be going up in a lot of larger societies. But I think perhaps the happiest societies in the world are the people that are choosing to stay out of it. So I think in the long run, the U.S. would probably do better for itself by staying out of a lot of world affairs. Like if we stayed out of the whole Russia in China conflicts, like we have the advantage of being basically controlling our own continent. Like even though, we haven't annexed Mexico or Canada, but functionally, they're our allies. Like we could probably could if we wanted.
But if you did that, people would get to run their own countries.
But, crazy, right? But no, I think honestly, if we stayed out of foreign affairs long enough, eventually Russia and China there would be mounting tension between them, because then they wouldn't have a common enemy.
We did that already. We did that in the 50s and 60s, essentially. Like Russia got more concerned about China. I don't know. I don't think about it. I think we stayed out of the China and Russia affair, which led to our interaction in Cambodia. Like we picked away at the regions that we in the Balkanization, like we picked away at Yugoslavia and we picked away at Cambodia and places that were on the edges of these places. And like, we're not having wars, we're having overseas contingency operations, which is exactly what Obama did, by the way. When he ended the war in Iraq, he called it an overseas contingency operation. And if you don't know, like Cambodia was way worse than like most of our wars, So there's ways that you can say, yeah, but then we're still interacting. But how would we not? Because we'd have American companies that would you have American companies that are all over the place, right? And that's what ended up happening with China eventually, like Nixon and everything. Like, we really should just build our companies in China. So we're doing it all on the outside of China, and we could just do it in China. There's no reason not to. Their government's kind of collapsing right now. Like Mao is out of the picture. We can easily engineer like a certain amount of control, but we barely need to, because these people just want to build companies and factories. We'll just make sure, like in this. So Rockefeller goes into China and he builds something called LEAD. Well, he does this all over the world, but LEAD is an international, it's like IGO or an NGO. I think it's an IGO, but it's LEAD was for environmentalism on the front of things. And also this is because the Bilderberg group wouldn't allow for Asia. So under Rockefeller, they had to create the Trilateral Commission, because the Trilateral Commission would allow for Asia to be involved with some of this, planning that the Bilderberg Group originally was running for the most of the world. So they decided with LEAD that they're going to allow for companies to work in these, overseas companies. Already there are companies in like the Banana Republic and there's all over the world. They're thinking, well, we'll break this Cold War barrier. We'll go into socialist companies and build VCRs. We'll get these, amazing tech guys in Czechoslovakia. We'll have them in Poland work on it, because we have computer crossing, information crossing already at this point. And there's always been a space alliance, which is just completely counterintuitive to the Cold War. So they're thinking like, well, we could figure out a way that we could work with Russia. So LEAD comes out and LEAD says we're going to have, we'll have corporate subsidies for the governments that allow for environmentally friendly policies, because they're worried about Russia having like nuclear tankers and all of these problems. And also Russia's kind of losing money at this point. There's collapsing bureaucratic, falling apart, etc. in like the 80s in Russia, like 70s into the 80s. Gorbachev starts the Glasnost, and he also with Perestroika has a few open policies. So they say you can have a company that you build yourself. You can have your own garden, you can have your own collective. We're going to own 51% as the state. We'll be the majority shareholder, but you can still own like 49% or maybe slightly less, but you get some of your company essentially, but we'll watch it and make sure it's safe. You're doing all the rules. And that began the tradition of CSR companies in both the West and the East, which led to China. China's whole thing is the government owns 51% of your company. You get to own 49%. You're a majority shareholder of your idea, which is, because it's their country, it's their equipment, it's their people. It's like everything, you're in their world, you're in their domain, but your idea was useful to them. But it's a billion ideas, right? So execution becomes important. So I don't know if that answered anything, but that's basically what happened in China, with
that just seems like to me, that's just like a big flashing light saying anarchy does not work. Anarchy does not work, because you're just highlighting the powers of, like corporations. Like when people work together, they can build things, they can go into new territories, they can set up operations. Like you can't just have like an anarchic world with no organization. Like people are going to organize voluntarily, and then they're going to like dominate because like no one else is organized. And then it creates like an arms race, but instead of arms, it's a cooperation race.
Yeah.
It's
But
like,
these orders
wow.
these events of order out of chaos that are cyclical really help, because the chaos allows for these things to assemble, right? So you look at like China in the early 2000s, like 2001 to 2008, and you can do anything. Like there was real free market enterprise at that point. They were just like, if you want to sell gasoline, go stand on the street next to the kid with lemonade and sell gasoline out of a bucket. Like you can do that. Like that. Now you have a gas station. That's in China. And there's now eventually like rules started to emerge because, they had to, but there was just so much openness to ideas. And the same with India. India was crazy, right? Like you could just do anything. Crazy things were happening. But out of that, things have emerged. And now you're right. There's like there are elite, there are corporations, there are things. But every time you break one of those systems, then another cooler one emerges. So it's nice to have that chaos for that purpose.
Yeah, right now, I think like with anarchist philosophy, you could say that part of it is questioning the systems of power that be, and if something isn't justified, then you should cut it out. And I think there are just numerous examples of just public waste where we do have organization, but it's the things that we have organized, quote unquote, that have been creating the most waste. So I think the thing about capitalism and expansion and organization is a lot of these things they did very much occur naturally all over the world, and there was no stopping them. It's like if you created 10 societies and they didn't know about each other, chances are most of them would develop capitalism at one point. The problem is saturation. How much of the world gets saturated to where you're not really pioneering new territory? Like, the territory has essentially been figured out. Well, we're already kind of there because there are countries everywhere. So I think there's still kind of a gray area there. Like, you would have to essentially have a sort of a world philosophy and not a one world government, but I'm saying in order to actually have anarchy, you would have to have a lot of treaties and mutual agreements in order for it to actually work. It would have to take take all of the world powers at once.
How do you enforce an agreement if there's no top-down governmental structure to ensure contracts are honored?
I mean, that's essentially, that's what treaties are. There's like an international authority, like that says theoretically we're going to enforce treaties, but like if two countries make an agreement, it's just like kind of an agreement, like we're not gonna fuck each other, It's,
right.
So
that's why treaties are really weak, but contracts are really strong, because contracts have a backing of like a top-down structure.
Yeah, and that's another example of, like, if there's international law, sometimes the international law is the most powerful deciding factor, like which makes every country, end up, paying their debts. Pay your debt, or essentially everyone's going to be at war with you. That seems to be like what it is. So yeah, the short answer.
I don't know. Like, doesn't China and Russia and even the United States just ignore our treaties whenever it's convenient to us?
I mean, that's exactly what happened in World War II, is like there were a million treaties made in World War II and most of them were ignored, and that just led to escalation. But sometimes treaties do mean a lot more than I think a lot of people give them credit for.
That led to escalation in World War II.
You're quiet right now, Andreas.
Dang it. World War One.
World War One. Yeah. No, his mic was just a really quiet.
Is it fixed now? Did I get it better?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Yeah,
I'm having problems with my adapter. I need to get a new adapter.
No
Sorry.
problema. No hay problema. But no, I think really it's about what, for example, why are we not at war with China? Why are we not at war with all of our enemies? Like, really, I guess that could lead to a lot of other conversations, but I think honestly, getting to a less globalized society, it's more about being in moving that to the psychological forefront of saying, okay, all of us understand that this is important, so like we're just all going to do it, because it's just like it's not something we can kick down the road any longer. Like, we understand this is like an important survival issue. So as soon as we understand that's an important survival issue, that's when things will be less globalized, I think. But I think, for example, like the issue with China, I think China has been very much screwed over by international trade over the years. I'm not trying to defend them or say I'm pro-China. I think objectively it has altered their society in a way that it's just very, very spiritually draining for the people, and it hasn't benefited them quite so much as they anticipated. So in hindsight, they probably would have changed the way the 20th century would have played out, and I think in that hindsight, it would have given a lot more.
Wait, can you articulate which trade factors you feel are hurting China?
Everything that's like half the things that we buy or wear are made in China or some other Asian country. There are some exceptions there, of course, but
it hurts China to have foreign markets buying their stuff.
No, it's the stuff, how they make the stuff. Have you seen like China, even barring that most Chinese work environments have drastically improved in the last 10 to 20 years, but probably 10. Even still, there's a lot of crises outside of China manufactured by China outsourcing to Vietnam and Africa, etc. But in China itself and everywhere that they've made manufacturing hubs. Cities have environmental, disastrous, toxic levels that they have apps to tell them if they can go outside. You know, there's a lot of places where it's not environmentally good to breathe, right? Because of the weird toxins from the plastics or the metals, you know, just from making batteries. It doesn't rain for 10 miles around the city in China where they manufacture the lithium batteries. There's a lot of circumstances like that from manufacturing, which eventually like can be cleaned up. And China's done amazing thing. One of the most interesting things I thought was when Greenpeace tried to go into China. Greenpeace is, you know, anything but a reliable and trustworthy. It seems a little corrupt and out of control, but they get it. They get some credit for trying to fix environment. They get to China. China makes that rule: 51% of your organizations owned by the state. Now all of a sudden, Chinese Greenpeace, run by the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party, is the best Greenpeace in the world. They're doing the most work. They're fixing China. They've done all kinds of things to the water treatment facilities. And it's incredible what that does to the communities abroad from the water treatment facilities, like hundreds of cities, right, that are affected. So it's crazy to think about also how much this is changing rapidly and China's getting better. But, yeah.
Yeah. Any points is a good point about China, just because I don't know everything. It's just that the issue isn't international trade can be a good thing, but like just the fact. So like the bottom line is that the shirts that we buy from China like got produced for like $1.50. Like, yeah, that sounds great for us, but it's like, does giving them $1.50, you know, does giving a factory worker $1.50 for making that shirt, does it sound awesome? Made in Canada. Felicidad. That's awesome. Yeah, it's good. But that's what I'm saying. If there's not an equitable exchange, if there's not an equitable exchange of real resources, and really that is a form of exploitation. Like if the value of the labor is disproportionate, if we're saying that it's disproportionate and we're making, you know, all these dollars, quote unquote, value, and then we're giving less value than what we're actually receiving in reality.
Do you believe there are more people today than there have ever been in history alive at one point, or not? Do you think that like Atlantis had 10 billion people population, or do you think that like the 8 billion people population is like the most people we've ever gotten to?
No, I have to cut myself short because I could be back later, but I have to go. My nephew is going to get picked up from school, so I got.
Oh man, we're about to get fun. Okay, well, go be responsible. Wait, can you answer that though? Do you think that we're at the peak of population?
I mean, in history, yes.
Okay, so in history, yes. So like, don't we have more opportunity than ever before? Like, couldn't we just like, isn't it better that we got to this point through all that stuff, and we could just like, we could have a civilization reset right now, and it would be worth it that we went through that because we have so many people that have maximal opportunity?
Well, I mean, I think our population will double over the next, 50 years. Because Africa, just really the population's going crazy, like in Africa, for example. I could be way wrong, but I think it's going to go way higher. So I just don't know. I just don't know where exactly things are going to go, but they're going to industrialize. And I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the U.S. does because, we'll see if we try to maintain our power or try to make adjustments, or we'll try to put the right training wheels on capitalism, I guess, to try to not make it, try fly off the wheels. I think that's a good way to put it, but that's just what I think.
How many people live in Africa right now? Okay, that's good. It looks like they think that the population of Africa could reach 2.45 billion by 2050.
That's pretty cool.
Okay.
All right, I'll catch you soon.
Love you, bro. See you soon. Oh, I should have shown. Everybody go to Paranoid. So, yeah. American Time Machine Spotify. I'll do it. I swear. I'm a good friend. I'll pull it up. So everybody, if you like cool music and made by actual human hands from all across time and space, go to Paranoid American. I keep doing that because American Time Machine, American Time Machine, American Time Machine. Go to American Time Machine. Listen to American Time Machine. It's great music. I really like it. So yeah, check it out. He's a good guy. So what do you think, Seth? What do you think about this population thing and like the idea of maximization of opportunity because we have a larger population now?
So what are you getting at when you say maximize opportunity? I'm a little not following you on that exact
Oh, dude,
point.
every direction. First off,
Are you trying to say like we're maximizing well-being by having
no,
like,
opportunity, phenomenological diversity. We could have more suffering if we wanted to. We could have more opportunity for growth and love, and we could also have more opportunity for taxpayers. And we have more opportunity for work and for creativity.
Are you asking like a metaphysical question? Like, is our current state good?
Yeah, I think it is.
But that's what you're asking me, correct? Like, it's a metaphysical.
No, I mean, like, I don't know. I guess because I don't know if he had the same. You don't seem to have the same opinion about the world necessarily. That we're in like such a place of suffering by the end of the 20th century.
I mean, there is suffering, but there is lots of well-being. Like modern technology has like skyrocketed like leisure time and comfort, right? Like
Yeah,
I've got a couch that like has a motor where I can like lean back. Like I've got luxury, man. I got like custom pillows. Yeah, it was like ancient. People in the past didn't have even a percentage of what we have today. So like, yeah, like there's a lot of good things. There's some bad things too. I don't know. It seems like our 8 billion, I don't know. It seems like a kind of a sustainable number. Like I can imagine like the earth getting overpopulated to where it starts going downhill. You know what I mean? But I'm not like super pessimistic about, population.
Yeah, I feel like 8 billion's all right. Especially if it was spread out better, or better yet, condensed.
Yeah, I think I've heard like Germany does like certain things where they like try to preserve their wildlife. So they like make their cities really dense and tall. So they like they get like this, they get the balance between the order and the chaos by kind of compartmentalizing. And that seems like a good strategy.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I mean, you could definitely get most people into cities if cities didn't suck. I think that's a big problem, is that cities just kind of are too urban, and there's not. I mean, in some parts of the world, they've made cities pretty great. Like you go to like Chile and in France, they have boroughs, parks everywhere, like mandated they have to exist. You could have that at multiple high.
Oh yeah. Oh dude, in China they've got like what? They got like 40-foot skyscrapers that you can live in. You got like your nightclub, your movie theater, your shopping mall, your grocery store, all in the same damn building. You just take an elevator and go wherever the hell you want to go.
Yeah, you wouldn't ever leave the building.
Go visit your girlfriend on the 5th floor, then your side chick on the 8th floor.
Yeah, be careful with these Mormons. I'm sorry. No, but yeah, if you have like a casino on the floor, you could work at the restaurant and then, you live above it. Yeah. So they basically made an entire city vertical. That's the future, I think, in a lot of ways, especially if you have it be tall enough. You have tall enough ceilings. You can have entire parks, like atriums. This is it's definitely the coming future.
And like the whole concept of vertical farming, right? Like there's a complaint is like if you grow the population like vertically in skyscrapers, like you need more farmland horizontally. But like if you can like layer your farms on top of each other like a skyscraper of farming, you've got like near infinite capacity to accelerate crop production, you know what I mean? So like
we're gonna talk about wisdom and agency.
Oh man, that's the topic of the ages, man. Wisdom is where it's at. Now, a true philosopher is a lover of wisdom. Just perfection. But the question is, what is wisdom? Does anyone even know what it is that we're supposed to love?
They kind of made us study. They said Proverbs is wisdom. I remember, like, was the first thing about wisdom. Like, you want to know what wisdom is? You have to read Proverbs. That was like an early lesson. Like, this is a study of wisdom. There's a connection to it. But what do you think of? How do you like to describe wisdom?
So over the past couple of years, I've been trying to like build and articulate a pattern, like how to think about wisdom. It's been kind of at the back of my mind, bubbling up, and I'm starting to work on a blog to kind of formalize my perspective on wisdom. And one of my strategies for like articulating wisdom is whenever I'm trying to figure out a word, I go to the etymology first, right? Like Google the etymology, like what's the history of this word? What's the etymological roots? In Latin, what's wisdom? In Germanic form, in Old English, like where is this coming from? Because what we have today is an evolutionary process, right?
Yeah,
and if you
the vice domain wisdom, like, yeah, I don't know, break it apart. What is it?
Yeah, so like the ancient usages, there's kind of this pattern, right? You aggregate all these data points and you can kind of plot a trajectory for the evolution of wisdom, right? So like it kind of like sometimes part of the etymology, it's about sight. It's like wisdom is ability to see. And then another usage, it's the ability to know. And then another usage, it's the ability to guide, right? So there's all these different meanings that are kind of correlated into like this web. Like wisdom is that which connects sight, knowledge, and guidance, right? And what even is that? What does that mean? So sight, it's perspective, right? The wise person has a bigger perspective, right? So like you could have like, oh, if you can only see, like you have a radius, I can see 1 mile away. Well, the wise person, he gets in a tower, he can see 5 miles away. He's like, oh no, the enemy is coming around the mountain. You know what I mean? And everyone is foolish. We're like, oh, we don't know that we're supposed to prepare. And the wise man is like, hey, I can see what's coming, you need to prepare. And so because he can see, now he knows something and he can guide. And what is guidance? Guidance is moving us from point A to point B, right? So point A is the current situation. Point B is the goal, right? And so you can think of it in terms of truth and goodness. What is the truth about my current situation? And what is the good thing I need to pursue? And so wisdom is having the knowledge that allows you to see what we are, where we are, and where we need to go, and how to plot the trajectory to get us to that good thing. So it's a combination of epistemology and axiology. It's a combination of facts and values. It's a combination of science and religion. It's a combination of is and ought. Wisdom is what marries truth and goodness together and brings everyone along.
So it's
optimally.
The marriage of the tools. Hey, Yoga Poser made it. Ooh.
What's up?
Hello. Check one.
You're still all funny sounding and your microphone's echoey. Come back.
Roger. I'll use different headphones.
I'll see you in a second. He's trying. So humanity, using the different tools they have access to, like you have data and you know how to use the data. Is that kind of what you're saying wisdom is the marriage of like actually using them, knowing how to use it?
Yeah, like connecting the dots, right? So you've got the knowledge and you've got the good goal and connecting the dot. It's like 3 components. You have to know the 2 dots and you have to know how to connect them. And so if you foolishly connect them, then it's like, oh, you're not accomplishing your goal because you're doing it this slow roundabout way that's ineffective. But being able to see the optimal pathway, that's wisdom.
This is great. We have a new guest, Apple Eater from Rome. Good to have Rumblers. And they say, I didn't know Jack McBrayer did a podcast from his couch, which is funny because is Jack McBrayer Mormon? Because he kind of looks like he could be related to Joseph Smith. You know what I mean? But actually,
I don't know who that is. Yeah.
Jack McBrayer, he's from like he's on like the TV shows. He does like the no, I'll get it up there for you. You know, he's that dude. You know, he's that one. Yeah. This is like your worst. This is like your worst criticism in this one. I always think he looks way. If you really look at If you really look at Seth, he looks like Machine Gun Kelly. It kind of blows
now
my mind.
that's more like it. Yeah, that's
kind of weird.
Way more accurate. Come on now.
Neither one of these things are really compliments, but I like the Machine Gun Kelly one better. If we covered you in tattoos, I wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. Don't dye your tongue black. Hold on.
It seems like people are weirdly fascinated with my appearance. They always want to like say, "Oh, he looks like this," or "He looks
sensorily
like that."
that's like the only thing they have access to. So you have a very limit. Imagine you're the single-celled sea amoeba that's feeling for the feces of other animals at the bottom of the sea in order to consume, right? That's your only sense. That's basically humanity for the most part, and more with like video, because you've got just this one camera thing that's recording all the time, and you're using that. That's the way that you have to know people.
We are the feces, and they are consuming the feces.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know if you got your audio working, Yoga. I'm sorry.
Well, tell me, does it sound better?
Yeah, well, it's something. I mean, yeah, it's audio.
Just to let you know, I podcast from a couch because of back pain. So that's.
I tune into most of the broadcasts Xirtus puts out there, so I'm well aware of your background. Not only I appreciate the explanation. I won't.
It's kind of funny though. It's like if Professor X and X-Men was like, "Pardon me if I don't get up." You know what I mean? Like,
no, but again, just your intellect and approach to conversation is one of the reasons why I feel honored to be included in the conversations that Xirtus puts out there. Your approach to logic and reason is, some would say, I feel like there was a time and place where people coming at things from your kind of earnest academic perspective would have been seen as closed-minded thinkers in the box, like book smart, that sort of thing. But even just the basic ability to carry on a conversation, let alone complete a sentence or convey a thought or idea
at this time in the morning, my God, you know,
is we're getting closer and closer to idiocracy every day. So again,
I guess the East Coast, you're fine.
Yeah,
It was latter day. Does that have anything to do with like late wave capitalism? Is it like a? It was like
actually, you know what? It definitely does, because of the United Order is this idea of American utopian socialism, and it's interesting because I don't know. It's not a huge deal to me, but I've noticed a lot of people will be talking about a lot of like Deseret kids that are really interested in utopia. They're very anti-Marxism, very anti-communism, because they're like, wow, the cultural Marxism, you know, etc. But then they will ignore the United Order, that their entire organization is built around this idea of a socialist utopian socialism from the 19th century, which is a direct response to, I would say, actual late stage capitalism, because capitalism kind of went out of vogue in the 19th century, and by the 20th century you have oligarchical feudalism again. It's just return to a feudalism.
Like the paradigm of the 1950s was based on kind of an accepted paradigm, was that along with socialism and communism came the kibbutz model, where within 20, 30 years, there's maybe even like 2 generations of kids and like 33-year-old grandmothers, and nobody knows whose kid is who, because all the adults were raised maybe as like a litter of children, and then kind of somehow decided not to get into the types of even trades, let alone mercantile affairs, that would cause them to eliminate each other, either by intimidating and, you know, creating territories, and they all kind of just chose to live together and somehow pull in the same direction.
Yeah, it seems like it was culturally more appropriate to send off your children to apprenticeships. So when that started to dissipate, the logic of orphanages or like large gathered foundries for children raising, you know, the alternative to Jesuit schools where they would raise your kids as well. It might have been confusing because generationally people weren't raising their kids in European culture.
Right. And so maybe the idea of capitalism or Western society is based on kind of the nuclear family and not necessarily generational wealth, or even, although that wouldn't be a bad thing for us to uncancel. Trying to think of the other paradigms that come along with socialism that led to this kind of cultural fear of that shift, when in reality I was raised just kind of after the generation where throughout the Cold War, it's drilled that you're hiding under your desk as a child because the Russians are going to nuke you. And it's basically giving them a baseline reaction every day of, by the way, there's like a massive enemy out there with a massive weapon. He might kill us all anyway. Oh, and now back to like talking about, like the caterpillar turns into like a butterfly because it goes into a chrysalis. We call it metamorphosis. And the kids are going, and they just worked into their nervous system that once a day they dive under their desks because there's a massive enemy out there with a massive weapon that might kill us all at the drop of a hat. But anyways, now back to talking about, Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah, you mentioned something really cool there. Like the whole thing about communism and like the fear and whatever. It's so funny that like Mormonism started with such like a socialism bent. Same with Christianity in the New Testament, but then they evolved away from that. And I think it comes down to evolutionary psychology, which you're alluding to. It's like the structure of society is really relevant because like it's like the psychology within like a family, right? In a family, you're one unit, you're sharing your genetics, you're all in this together. Everyone is okay with communism when they view each other with family psychology. And so when you're in a religion, your religion hacks into the family psychology mentality. You call each other brother and sister. We're all children of God. We have the same heavenly parents.
There's an authority structure that you all kind of have to respect or choose to respect.
Yeah, and so they're 100% fine with communism if it's their religious family.
It's even better than a family, though. There's a non-ambiguous chain of command within the the executive branch, so to speak. Whereas in a family structure, people may or may not step up into certain roles or choose to take on certain responsibilities. I like what you said there, though.
Right.
I think.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's a power dynamic. It's a trust dynamic. It's I trust the people inside my group, and I don't trust the people outside. So if the outsiders want us to be doing communism with them, like screw that, because I don't trust them. You know what I mean?
So did either of you go to like day camps or summer camps growing up and learn kind of songs, whether they be church songs or?
At some point, both of those things, not necessarily related, but maybe. Yeah, I think I did. I definitely went to a few. I definitely went to summer camps. I think a few of them had some songs.
Even though I had, I guess, 4 aunts and uncles in the area I grew up in, many cousins. Outside of that, there wasn't really a generationally extended family and it was almost practiced, gatherings were by rote. And religion as well for me was Reformed Judaism. It was very informal, only went on the high holy days.
Oh yeah, Father Abraham had many sons. That's one of them, right?
Well, so that's the thing, right? You start singing something like that, and that doesn't ring a bell with me. But if you were in a room with 200
many
people,
sons had Father Abraham, and I am one of them, and so are you. No, that's not a thing that they made you.
There was a crocodilio, my croc, say Seco, 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 Seco. No. And then there's the more universal ones like Jacob, Jingleheimer Schmidt.
Oh, you're pulling me in, bro. The Chimera sits in the old gum tree.
Oh wow! Oh wow!
Tosaveri, Sam became a wacky brown.
This is key though, because like you're gonna one of these within time you can't measure. A baby will be in your hands, and you're gonna be having to know that to unlock the key, bro.
Well, that's the thing is, what I didn't realize as part of my psychosocial neuro-linguistic development, that was before all the programming was able to take root. They had to build up a structure of fertile soil, and after you learn your first few words, I think when Baby Shark came out, it's neat that like the baby can sing it, but it's like that's what they do in Guantanamo Bay to the really bad prisoners, is they put them in a room and they put that song on repeat. And imagine being subjected to that while you were sleeping as a child. I mean, as opposed to Chopin or Bach, and at least absorbing that music, or even just someone reading the dictionary in a language that you'll never speak is probably better than what the children are. It's because they get celebrated when they finally learn to your first accomplishments. So looking back though, when I go out to a bar, when I was in Ohio, especially, there were these songs that people would sing from high school or from Boy Scouts or this, but in Massachusetts, not so much, but there were these songs where everyone sat in a circle and put their hands out. And on one side, your hand was on top, and on the other hand, so your hand, and on the other side, your hand was on bottom. So what happened is you're sitting in a circle. It can be down to like 3 or 4 people eventually, but it can be a group of 30 people. So you drop your kid off at camp. He's probably going to go like sit in the corner and be shy and like not know what's going on, because a lot of these other kids have been going to the same camp for a while. But it's these, how do you broach that social boundary and then feel included in literally in a yoga posture, sitting cross-legged, getting human contact and then you're waiting for it to come around. So it's a slapping game. You go like this, and every time, it's like you pass the slap around, and at the end of the song, you count down to 10. And if your hand is there and the person slaps it, or you pull it out at the last second, then it's like a duck, duck, goose, and you're out. And then you go wander to the playground and go, but then when the game, you can tell when the ring's getting smaller and smaller. And in the meantime, you're hearing this song of nonsense words. It's crocodilio, my croc. And then when you look it up on Google, there's variations to it where crocodilio, my, no, that's not the words. What it is quackadilly, like, I don't know. It's other words that are also nonsense words that make, so an analog to that is Yankee Doodle. And I think in the Revolutionary
We just did
War,
this. Oh my God.
they were shouting versions of it back and forth over the trenches to each other that were like insulting the towns where each other's came from and each other's.
Well, sort of. Yankee Doodle Dandy is a British. Okay, it's like a British poem from a newspaper article from like the 1780s or 17. Might have been. I think it's before. I forget if they were. I think it was like right after like 1780s or something like that. And so they said Yankee Doodle came to London riding on a pony. Like, he doesn't have a proper majestic steed, and he stuck a needle in his hat and called it macaroni. And the needle with the feather is this very Moroccan thing to do. And macaroni is an Italian fashion. We had big hair and amazing clothes. It's like what the British were really into at the time. So you've got this imbecile who is thinking that their weird worldly Moroccan feather hat pin is the same thing and comparable to what's going on in our courts and what people consider to be fashionable and good. So
you see in some of the engravings, Seth, have you seen the pictures of the hats Andreas was talking about with the giant feathers? And
I probably have. I'm struggling to bring it to
there were
mind.
also rituals where you would buy a feather and burn it and kind of make a wish. And instead of someone walking out of roses, selling roses for $5 each, the way that they were earning is they had a bundle of the craziest looking feathers you've ever seen. Okay. Well,
wow.
And so macaroni style was very ostentatious and
yeah, that's kind of insane.
You had to have like 3 people help you put on your wig, that sort of thing. But so you understand, if there were remaining dinosaurs outside of eating their meat, the reason that they would have been hunted to extinction is because their plumage was probably involved in their mating rituals, and they might shed their feathers once a year, but to pick the prime feathers.
He's back. Good.
Wow.
American Time Machine.
I'm very happy to see you. It's been a long time.
He's back to the future.
So American Time Machine, do you think that we killed off the last of the dinosaurs as a human species potentially by selling their feathers for fancy hats? And that's because you were talking about the song Yankee Doodle Dandy, and he stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Now, the Egyptians had another needle, because Andreas said there was one version of the song that was stuck a needle in his hat. So in your head, what did the Egyptians do? They stuck a needle up the nose to pull out what?
Come on, Muffins.
Come on, one of you guys got to know this. Don't leave me hanging here.
Stuck a needle up his nose?
In ancient Egypt, why did they... What?
Mummification.
Yes. So what they would do is they had a hook. They said the brain was useless gray matter. They didn't really. That was the rumor about them. And so they would stick a needle in their nose, and not to lobotomize someone, because that's another way to do it, but is to literally scoop out the brain little bit by little bit. And they didn't even put it in the canopic jars. They preserved all the other organs, but they're like, that's, again, that silly, whatever that mush is in your brain, it's just fatty tissue, right? And so calling it macaroni, the French would eat brains, right? It's called, or the French eat anything because they know they can cook it so that it tastes
but
good.
the point is that George Washington and Thomas
stuck
Jefferson
a feather in the hat and called it macaroni is one.
They're wearing hats like this, they're wearing like Moroccan style hats, like.
But also the capital is your dome and the feather is an antenna on top. Get it? Ho.
I feel like you're trying to build up towards an argument.
No, again, this is the holographic. This is part of what drew me to the Tartaria sphere, essentially, and allows me not to fixate on Tartaria specific information, but it's this idea that there's 5 layers. I'm not saying like, oh, look, this is kind of neat and similar to this is what's kind of neat and similar. Do you guys think it's like, no, there's this layer, this layer, this layer, this layer. And it's like there's the Tartary sheep, and they're saying there's like a bush that kind of looks like a sheep, but was it a metaphor for cotton, or was it that animals with lots of fur would get caught in the briar bushes, or is it that because again, there's a huge paradigm shift between raising livestock in order to make clothes,
cat
wool,
sits on
versus cotton
keyboard.
Oh, kitty.
For English, I think macaroni, it just meant like fancy at the time. I don't know why.
Just macaroni fashion.
Yeah, macaroni fashion, right?
Meaning, and they would appropriate things from French culture. That's why people, or in the English language especially, picks up English, French words. And people that use
fashionable fellow 18th century Britain, stereotypical men in the macaroni subculture dressed and spoke and behaved in an unusual epicene and androgynous manner. The term macaroni pejoratively referred to a man who exceeded the ordinary bounds of fashion in terms of high-end clothing. If he was a bit Stoke-on-Trent is another term, which refers to being on the streets of Trent, out of Stoke City in Manchester, where the higher fashion, tailors are, that's where they're at. So
there's an equivalent in modern day Africa where instead of the flashy clothing being seen as rich and ostentatious, it's like the one acceptable form of being flashy, where you could have on, if it's hand done kit, it could be a $5,000 outfit. You're not going to wear jewelry. The guy might be on a rundown motorbike or on a pedal bike, but you kind of, and he's not going anywhere. He's sticking around the village or the countryside, but there's like a bunch of guys that just dress up real nice. It's like Snoop Dogg almost.
So I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but like I feel like sexual selection is bullcrap. Like people say the peacock, like the male peacock has these big flashy tail, the tail with the feathers and the little eyeballs, and they're all green and blue and shiny. And like the female is all like brown and camouflaged and small.
Right, which just shows you how it really works in nature. Males are the pretty ones in nature, and then with capitalism and with our weird civilization, we've inverted everything.
Well, the basic reason for this is
capitalism.
Right. So again, I assume everyone has
the exploitation of the male worker.
Baseline.
Feudalism. Feudalism, because with feudalism you need to put someone in charge
sitting on the nest. Again, I don't know if this is the Stoic, but again, ask a bunch of questions in a patronizing voice as a way to seem like the most obnoxious person on the stream, and that way you all seem really patient for tolerating someone like me. So ready? Okay, why is the female nice and dark in camouflage colored? Because it sits on the what?
Yeah, keep the nest. Yeah.
Oh, right. And so the male is there to fly off in case, to be the distraction to the predator, and hopefully the female blends in and they don't notice. That's
but the girl's also looking for like the super
in that paradigm.
It's scary.
Birds are reptiles, and they're looking for the super like psychedelic colored and big throat. Like reptiles are more interested in that, and it's also because the females are so good at eggs. Like they're so good at genetic sustainable. Keeping the genome clean and without mutation. So looking for something that has mutation is more viable. And they're like, okay, well, we have a very good thing going here, but the environment is changing a lot. And so so in our civilization, we're seeing more and more drastic examples of bright colored male reptiles, but also vice versa with mammals, because not all mammals, just with humans. It seems just with humans, we have a situation reverse where because of the exploitation and feudalism, men were put in charge of the family dwelling, and they were forced to collect taxes, right? Which is like grain harvesting. And this goes into the 16th, 17th century, right? Like churches, abbots, and the Holy Roman Empire. They're forcing the fathers to collect the grain, but the daughters in the room, they're doing all the grain collection, you know? So eventually it inverts the system, and the viability of, you know, a woman attracting and trapping a sustainable male in that system, it inverts everything, right? So all of a sudden the woman becomes the thing that's trying to be attractive, coming with a dowry.
Well, so I think what you're saying kind of adds on to what Seth was saying. So what Seth said was the kernel, and I'm going to go ahead and second that notion that the evolutionary biologists have boiled down the curriculum so that the fifth grader can understand it, and then they're still teaching it when they get to high school and college. So
Nice.
the idea of sexual selection. So within a society with no culture, where people are constantly kind of stealing each other's infants or children for reproductive capital or human capital's purpose, eventually the male and female will not be as dimorphic, so that either the men will kind of stop growing facial hair, so that at a young age you can't tell, unless you know there's a third, you're not going to be able to like run in and like grab one, you know, so to speak, and like know from the woods and know which gender it is at a young age. And the fact that we are a generally sexually dimorphic species when it comes to certain characteristics. Although again, everything exists on a spectrum, and when people talk about men's brains and women's brains and like duh, you know, to me they just sound like again, I would say they need to study evolutionary biology, but it's the textbooks are kind of fallen behind, because again, with any given parameter, whether let's just give it height. So yeah, well, men are bigger than women, like they're bigger and stronger and more muscular, right? And it's like, yeah, but okay, so take two random samples and pick one metric, and it's just a betting game, and you don't have any way to know that there's a fixed number of these metrics that are going to be, oh yeah, see, the male is taller, see, because men are taller. It's like, right, but pick two different people from two different parts of the world, and again, do the same comparison, and you're not going to get the same result by just looking at their height, or just by looking at their height and weight, or just by looking at their height and muscle composition, or by looking at the size of their cheekbones, or the you know, how big their brow ridge is, or the width of their hips, or the ratio of their chest to their shoulders, or their head to, like, all of that shit is, again, is on a spectrum. Like, and if you're off the spectrum, like people try to point to people and say, I think they're on the spectrum. You know, it's like, well, so if black and white is here and gray is everything in between, then again, so like, what are you saying you are? You know, or if it's on the grayscale, if we're talking about, you know, that type of information, I feel like most of the easy talking points that get people to agree when they're feeling uncomfortable about something, when certain people hear it is very hurtful to them, and half the people in the room are probably wishing that they knew what to say to kind of talk back at that person.
Is it just that this girl's Russian? But I feel like it works. No? Am I wrong? I feel like this one's okay.
Is that your type? Is that your type?
I was surprised as you are. I was like, I was looking for. I was like, this is gonna be bad, and I'm like, yeah, no, actually, she's all right.
Is that your form of sexual selection right over there?
That's getting right back to nature, man. Like, give her a chance. I don't know. Maybe she's
because again, because men are good at like math, and women have more like emotional intelligence, and so like that's why it makes sense that X, Y, yeah. But again, same with those types of things. Put a random man and a random woman in the room, and you don't know who has more emotional intelligence. The woman could have emotional intelligence of a doormat, and the man could be up here, and she could be a freaking engineer. You know, it's like.
I just want to know, while Yoga was talking, he mentioned males that were lacking facial hair, and for some reason, Andreas, he panned the camera over to me Was there some message you're trying to communicate there, Andreas?
I think,
See, I didn't shave for a whole week, but it's light colored, so I can get away with it. Usually, I
should have.
shave.
I should have really gone.
He's got the
here.
Ben Shapiro shadow going on. I'm
Yeah.
feeling it. I didn't know it came in that well.
Yeah, it goes with
solid.
the plaid. I feel like we're doing it right.
So
Yeah.
wait, you can give the dish on this, Andreas.
You
So
gave
this is
it to. I'm the only one. Yeah.
American
Immediately
Time
always
Machine,
the
and
one.
Seth, you know that Andreas used to work with, or I don't know if he still does with Timcast, right? You know what
I don't
Timcast
anymore.
is.
Yeah, but
I know
stories there,
that.
yeah. I heard some stories.
Because sometimes there are people with huge followings and big numbers, but some people have never bumped it. But so I'm pretty sure that Tim uses beard black, where it's like it's amazing. You see these videos online of people doing it up here. Where there's like a product that you put in, and it immediately makes your hair look much thicker. But so Andreas, that's not one of the things he's allowed to comment on. Is whether or not Tim Pool uses beard black.
He's just part Korean, bro.
So what do you think the role, like from an evolutionary perspective, what does it mean for the future of humanity that we deceive each other about our phenotypes?
How do you mean? Just seem
Like
by dyeing our hair?
Fake beards. It implies
dye my hair.
I have. When you have a fake beard, you're saying I have the genetics that create beards, but you're
Seth,
lying.
did you hear about the lawsuit of the man who sued the woman he met on the internet and had children with because he didn't know that her nose looked like that when she was a teenager, and then had it fixed, and the child was so ugly that it was going to need plastic surgery. And again, the logic, and there was this was in the actual news.
Sure. Yeah, like my opinion on like sexual attraction is like you're trying to balance out your genes. Like they've done studies, they've said like, you can have two recessive genes, that when two recessive genes combine, you get like a horrific disease in your children. And they found like if the dude has half of the disease and the girl has the other half of the disease, when they smell each other, they're like repulsed by the odor of the other. It's like the genes are saying, hey, we're not a good match, do not reproduce, you know what I mean? And so when you find someone with opposite genes, you reduce the risk because you're balancing each other out. And so when you're looking for a mate, you're like, that person, based on their phenotypic structure, they kind of mirror me and they balance out my traits. And so that is a good combination for me. But if all of those traits are fake, you're like giving my child disease, like genetic diseases, because I thought you balanced me, but you don't.
Well, you were talking about phenotype as opposed to pherotype or pheromone, because it's like, well, dude, it's like you smelled me. That's what that could be your defense, It's like I did change my features, and also sometimes if people have reconstructive surgery, it's because they had, they felt like they were a targeted individual. They were forced to go through some sort of witness relocate, or they had an accident at a young age where they fractured growth plates in their face or in their skull, where as they got older, they basically got to like choose what that's kind of what Elon Musk, how he arrived at his current look is because he did have a lot of injuries at a younger age. And so why, on one hand, with the type of procedures he's had done, people could see it as cosmetic surgery, but it had to look like something, He didn't choose the Fabio look.
What kind of injury? I don't know about this. He had a bunch of injuries when he was young.
Elon Musk's brother was just on the Lex Friedman podcast and talked about how violent things were as children growing up and the types of fights and when kids would gang up on each other.
Wow.
And Elon's mentioned it a few times on here and there. There's not a lot published on it, but
interesting.
I think it was Elon Musk's brother said he had to watch as his father looked like he was going to beat Elon to death, and just either kind of gave up most of the way there, and his brother knew that he was just so small at the time that he didn't really have an option to like try to stop it, because then his father would turn on him with. And again, when you're watching that kind of violence, he said it was
So this is what Tesla is about, just impressing his father.
Good podcast.
His father married his adopted daughter. Right? There's a bunch of weird stuff with that guy.
Tesla was very interesting, and as far as someone who showed up at college, and everyone's going every time he raised his hand and going, "Are you sure you can't do AC electricity motor things? Because like And every time he did that, they'd be like, listen, stay after class. You're wasting everyone's time. And they would say, like, this is not the place for you. If you want to study that type of thing, like, yes, we have a chapter on AC electricity. And in order to make it a motor spin with it, you have to have a commutator. And it's not that it was blasphemy or hereticism. It's just, it's like you were at NASA trying to talk to them about the flat Earth, essentially, which is kind of funny because the flat Earth model of the 4 magnets or, angels around the edge was what inspired him to draw the diagram for the first AC model. And within his lifetime, he not only saw the paradigm shift, but tapped Niagara Falls as like a big middle finger to everyone in his life who said, kid, get real. What?
Well, yeah, like I think there's a lot to. The crazy thing about Tesla, like Tesla the person, is just reading about like his theories of power and how little we've expanded upon them. It does seem like a massive conspiracy theory because he essentially came up with a method to extract power just from essentially the atmosphere. I don't even think that's the right word, but it's like, here's electricity. Just because you channel this, you can electricity without even being hooked up to a grid. And so that seems like there's not a whole lot of exploration within that, but it does seem like it would be economical to explore it. But there isn't like refutations over his theories. It's like, well, we've never expanded upon them. There's always been industry involved with electricity and with the expansion of almost everything. So that would be another interest. It's been a while since I've read about all of his theories with free power.
Do you remember when he was coming into his prime as an inventor in the Americas, because he was friends with, I think it was Westinghouse or some other, he had some very rich patrons who allowed him to do a lot of experimentation. You're talking about sending electricity through the air. Now, the light bulb wasn't really invented until his lifetime. Early in his career, Edison kind of rolled that thing off the line. And then Tesla was big on vacuum tubes full of noble gases. And so before you had light bulbs, what would you use electricity for? Shit all is the answer, right? So outside of even sending electricity through the air, he was then saying you can send, he did a demonstration in Madison Square Garden, big tank of water, drops in a little toy boat submarine and tells the audience, tell it what to do. And someone goes, go down 10 feet. And it's like marked in the tank. And the thing goes down, go left 5 feet. And he's there, with a remote control. And it's seen as magic, but it's a technology demonstration. When you explain to people that you're sending waves, invisible waves through the air, and you're not saying it's powering the device. The device has batteries. People understood batteries and electricity for motors and that sort of thing. But the information through the air was one thing. So with the Wardenclyffe Tower, which is kind of a talking point that brings people into this,
and the earthquake gun,
pseudo-scientific realm. It wasn't really a earthquake gun. It was just a box.
Yeah, well, still made earthquakes. Pretty sweet. The thing that you attach to a building and it would do shake the
or a bridge. That's
oh yeah.
But the answer to your question, sorry, just last 5 seconds. The answer to the question is yes. You can send electricity through the air when you see like the induction plate that you put your phone on. That's not through but it's in the microwave frequency. So if we were pointing that all around, it would just be really warm all of a sudden when you were walking down 4th Street because like Johnny turned his grow lights on and like Power Station X was just like offline with their satellite that day and like sending the energy with an X-ray beam to a receiver. And instead of your satellite dish on the side of your house being for direct TV, you'd be catching X-rays off of something with like 500 lasers pointing off of it that were all, hot, enough power to cook an egg by the time it reaches your receiver. And then that turns into your electricity for your TV. So these wireless power systems are complicated, and it's the same reason we don't manufacture our own water boilers. And it's because you have to do it in a certain way with certain safety valves so that you don't end up with carbon monoxide poisoning all the time because the pilot light went out.
Wait, Kurt was going to ask something like an hour ago.
So yeah, so the answer is yes, you can send it, but it's in microwave frequency. Sorry for the long walk.
Someone mentioned the earthquake box.
I'll mute myself.
No, I think there was like an actual demonstration that figuratively Tesla made people like basically piss their pants because he managed to make an entire building shake for like it was like an actual earthquake. But I don't have any reference for that, but I do remember reading something to that effect.
Yes, that was one of these anecdotes. That was why he ended up going to Colorado Springs, and he had a bunch of really rich people in New York City who were like, yeah, how about you go experiment with that shit like anywhere else other than here? Thanks. Because the lightning bolts keep coming out of the sky, and there's blue. Because even in modern times, have you seen the blue lights glowing over New York City when there's a giant power transformer goes out at ground level, and then the sky above it just starts glowing blue like there's swamp gas or something. And then down on the ground, there's this thing that's flashing, quite brightly. It's happened 3 or 4 times, I want to say, in the last 10 years. But
so I have a question for Kurt. Basically, when it comes to like conspiracies, specifically conspiracies of like technological suppression, it's like the powers that be are not allowing us to develop our power according to Tesla's paradigm. My first question for these types of conspiracies is, if let's say America is stopping, the powers in America are stopping the technology from coming to fruition, what stops other countries from taking advantage of these rich power sources? You know what I mean? Like, in order for the conspiracy to work, it would have to be suppressing the entire globe. Every country would need to be technologically suppressed, which is kind of a unparsimonious hypothesis.
Yeah, very, very legitimate question. And I'm like, for me, I'm going to approach this like, I guess in some ways, like I'm an advocate of conspiracy theories. I'm like, yeah, they're awesome, they're fun to talk about. But as far as like, I think it's good to approach them from just like, okay, from what evidence do we have, or what's like philosophical perspectives do we have? So yeah, I think perspectives are important. So the one conspiracy that I'm going to reference now, I think conspiracies do happen all the time. It's all about which ones are actually happening and which ones are just fun to believe in. So one of the most advanced technologies that the United States doesn't have right now that we probably should have is just high-speed rail. And other countries do have a high-speed rail, but honestly, it's an example of why we don't actually have the free market. There are too many subsidies. There are too many areas in which oil is way too ingrained, because it would make such economical sense to have a high-speed rail system. Like if there's enough companies out there that could have the, I guess, overhead to cover the investment into high-speed rail and then profit off of it, because it's a super, super efficient system. It would make everyone's travel easier. But we have...
Okay, so now all the world's fairs, and I don't mean to interrupt, because you might be about to list like a series of things, but this is another thing that is often dragged out into the public square, right? And then it's left there. No one really has much of a commentary on it. So you did it with the light rail system. Oftentimes, is this a suppression of technology, or is this a pro-gas car type thing? And so do you concur? You've heard that in a number of cities, or, Ford buys up the technology, right?
I guess so. I don't know who does all the buying, I guess. I just know that the oil industry is just very powerful, and there is a lobbying system. We objectively have a lot of...
Question one, because here in Boston, there are still streets that have electrical wires strung over the top of them, and there's a bus with like a spring-loaded thing that holds it. But how many times have you heard of a person being zapped by electricity when walking over a light rail system? I mean, not often. Because it takes a lot of maintenance, and we underestimate the powers of voltage that can build up even just naturally in these, the third rail type systems where you could get fried. But see, the other issue is, so World's Fairs always oftentimes had a bunch of train stations leading to them. And it was like the last stop. And wherever there's a turnaround is where the orphans and or homeless people at the end of the day who had fallen asleep on the train and or refusing to get off the train because, they actually lived 50 miles west of the city, and, the hay wagon they meant to get on that day, didn't, or the horseback or the donkey, his donkey got sick. And so he's on the train, and then there's people that work on the train, so to speak, selling their bodies, where walking around the streets feels a little more dangerous, but then the trains themselves become these living entities and communities of people that may or may not have housing locally or otherwise. And so it's a liability on a society that way. So private transport, I'm not saying that it's a good thing or a bad thing. And when it comes to embracing freedom, providing a resource like that, but what does it mean when it's fouled? And, you know, when you're 3 generations or 4 generations in and 20 of your younger cousins are now streetwalkers strung out on drugs because they hang out on the train all day, the view of the light rail system is like, yeah, maybe, you know, we could work with a few neighborhoods to just tear up the light rail. And when you're talking about raking one neighborhood to another, if there's a lot of
light rails, not
a lot of poverty over there.
I don't
it's
get
a
the
good
point.
way where if the train's just running and running, you can like empty out entire stores or houses into the trains, and then there's records of this, and then it just ends up in a different part of town, right? I mean, the light poles, everything. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, if those are concerns, I think there are solutions to those concerns. Like, you could treat it. Yeah, I guess there are ways you can combine privates and public sectors to make it like even if you make it more expensive to take the train, but make it not so cheap that you can just get away with stupid things like that. I still think it's more viable at the end of the day than having our current system. Like, it's more viable than, you know, doing flight travel. It's more viable than, well, we either can take the flight or we can take bus, or
Uber and Lyft too, no? Or those types of
for short distances, yeah. But I mean more like connecting cities, like having like a transcontinental rail system.
So I think sorry to interrupt. There's like another problem to this whole paradigm, which is like eminent domain. Like, America gives people so many rights that it's like, oh, we want to build a high-speed rail that goes through your property, and Mr. Farmer is like, no, you know what I mean? And so, like, because America is individualistic and we respect our citizens, it like makes it harder to do like mass scale cooperation. Whereas in China, they're like more, you know, dictatorial. They're like, hey, we're going to bulldoze your home. And the people are like, no, please don't. And the government just smiles and does it anyway.
The great experiment. And the structure of our society is not as accidental as it may seem, or simply as bureaucratic. And the way that Washington, D.C., everyone always complains that Congress can't get anything done. And there's a bunch of people, you know, who used to wear wigs when they would talk about this stuff, going, yeah, that's exactly the way we designed it. Is the federal government is
isn't it kind of weird that like a true
forever to get anything done?
A true conservative should wear like a dress and a wig.
Yes.
Would you be more or less likely to get into politics if it came along with wearing a wig? That's what I want to know.
Well, do I get to pick the wig? Because it's like everyone wears the same kind of white curly wig. It's
and there are places where I think it's mandatory dress. Imagine being a politician, somehow getting into that, you know, being in a circle of people where that's how you get spun off as someone who's in office, elected to kind of the national parliament. And when you sit down at your job, you have a freaking wig on your head. I can't. Some people would say the same thing about my hair and the way I look, but I'm just saying
I think we still wore wigs to this day. It would capture what our current essence of the political system is, like, accurately. So it's like, it's a clown show, but like we're wearing suits to the clown show. It doesn't quite fit in, like business suits to the clown show.
Well, I mean, so here's the thing. I don't mind the wigs, but the wigs are obviously like an ancient Egyptian thing, right? They're trying to look like the Egyptians, and they're carrying on their tradition of wearing, because Egyptians wore wigs. But the other thing is they're wearing these black togas. They wear these garbs that they wear, right? And I'm cool with that. The thing that really bothers me is the suit, because the suit, it's like a waiter, you know what I mean? Like, why do you want to look like a butler? You know, this is what someone who worked for a Roman, like a slave, would wear this, because you don't want to get raped. You don't want your slave to get raped. So you put pants on them. It makes it harder to have your slave get in any trouble. You know what I mean? Because anything could happen to a slave. But if you're a free man, you know, you're wearing a dress.
I will say, judges don't get to be outside all day. That's one thing to consider. They they have to be locked up just judging people all day. Imagine how many other things you could be doing with your life than just sitting there judging people indoors all day. So, like, I don't know. I guess maybe I have a different perspective. If I can, I'll answer Seth's question efficiently right now if I can. We were asking why other countries haven't used Tesla's power. Like, I'm not convicted about this, but I do think if there's legitimacy to Tesla's ideas, theoretically, what could be keeping other countries from doing it is the lack of information. Like, we know about Tesla, but it's not like ingrained in our culture. It's been resurfacing over the past few years, really. And so, like, and also we're like the first movers. The US has so much cultural influence over the rest of the world and technology that like no one would even think to even try to emulate Tesla, because they think it's all just conspiracy. And that's kind of like created the reality of the belief that's conspiracy. But I think those are two contributing factors as to why. But maybe it doesn't actually work out as well. But that's the perspectives.
You think Iran and China and Russia, who are afraid of America, they're like, wow, America's got like this amazing nuclear arsenal. But no, we're not interested in Tesla's ideas about unlimited energy and power. It's like, who cares about like this superpower? Because to me, that doesn't make sense. Like all of these countries, they want power, they want energy, they want security. You know,
they do. I just think it's so out of like general like global consciousness. Like it's not even something they would seriously consider. Like if
Saudi Arabia is working on, like, type in Saudi Arabian free energy generator and you'll find a million TikTok videos, YouTube videos, like people in India and Dubai and
that'd be awesome.
Emirates. They're all Africa. People are all obsessed with the idea of making a free energy machine. A lot of the videos are hoaxes, but that still shows you they know what is interesting and it's trending. By the way, what's up, Frank? Good to see you. How's it been? You're muted. Hold on. Well, it's still muted. Yoga poser. Oh, he left.
You guys were talking about. You guys were.
Okay. Thanks, man. Yes.
So you guys were talking about wigs, and I'm just wondering, like, you know, it goes back to the sexual attraction thing. Like, what does it do when we're faking our appearance? You know, it's like genetically. Like usually like a guy with a full head of hair is like that attractive, flashy look. And then like some guys are bald and then they put on a wig and they still reproduce. It's like, okay, now we have male pattern baldness because of wigs. Changed my mind.
I was listening to you guys say something really interesting about the underground and the orphanages, and then my computer disallowed me to hear anything for like 6 minutes. So I'm sorry. I do not know where we are. Although I get your point about wigs, sir.
I think it was Steph and Yoga. You were talking about underground and orphanages at some point, and the rail systems and how quickly you can move them.
Cool.
You got muted. Ironically, you're muted right now. But you could unmute yourself, Stefan. I could try to do it. I can't. Oh, I did. There you go. Talk.
So yeah, the idea of the rail, or the notion, instead of saying the idea all the time, I'm going to try to say the notion of there being kind of a end of the line of any large scale or small scale rail system, if it's not a loop, and that being a place of no return and or last resort for lots of people, either by default or by design. And then especially after the World Fair kind of blows into town and people are coming from all over to sell their wares and their fortunes and earn their keep, you know, as on summer jobs, this, that, or the other. Eventually, when the World's Fair leaves town, there's that kind of, I don't want to call it an underclass or underbelly, because in reality, that was the lifeblood that kept everything turning. But when the customers stopped showing up,
yeah, it's like if you look at Europe and they do like a football World Cup, and then they'll rebuild the entire town's infrastructure so people can show up, and because they're going to have 10 million people for the World Cup, but then that town's not going to have 10 million people using that infrastructure again, so they leave, and
so they either stage, or there oftentimes is a large fire. Sometimes it's in the ice tower or like a refrigerated area, which is interesting because people are again demonstrating technology they've cooked up at home, and now they're bringing it as a display of the best of the best of the modern, state of the art. And so sometimes that stuff goes sideways. And then when people move into those structures after and then rewire everything, and there's a telephone line in the wall, and they start putting power through it, and then they hook it up to an aerial because they realize that there is this gradient. And, right before a thunderstorm, you can basically light the whole house just by plugging everything into this other socket. But then if you do that the right number of times or the wrong number of times, it creates, a thermal characteristic to the electricity flowing through the copper wire, which then creates a flammability issue. And so the reason that, the same way we're taught not to play with fire as kids is because humans are dumb enough to play with fire, whereas it seems like intrinsically we're almost just smart enough not to mess with electricity, because by the time you're really trying to manipulate it, you're doing math that's complex enough that shows that you had the discipline and mentorship with, towards that type of learning, where not to pretend that you know more than you know in that field. In other fields, it's encouraged almost to kind of make that next guess, or whether it be postulating a new anthropological theory, or finding a new species, pushing the boundaries in some way. Whereas with electricity, the goal is kind of safety factors and then some. Zeus was the most powerful god and had lightning bolts. Right? So.
Do you guys know, or have you figured out, I guess, why it seems to me that the World's Fairs, as some have theorized, bring in all this new technology, but then they're covering up or actively trying to do something with older structures they no longer want to be part of society, or they want to assimilate for something else. But you have all these technology ideas that kind of belong to an older world or a very ancient world, and then an older 1800s version of the world, or whatever, where we have some lost history there. And then all of these things are suppressed, like the ancient or the older structures of the World's Fairs supposedly were kind of covering up or destroying or assimilating, and all these new ideas, and then none of that being allowed to go further, like ideas from Tartaria or ideas from Tesla sort of stuff or whatever.
Well, so again, Tesla being wireless electricity is one thing. Sending wireless communications of just data, zeros and ones, let alone sending telegraph type signals, spooky action at a distance, as it was called originally, or full on voice through the wire, or voice and image, let alone moving image. So imagine the World's Fairs, oftentimes they would build what were called crystal palaces, and it was some of the very few bits of architecture that were dismantled first. That was how you knew the show was leaving town. And there were these giant, largely glass structures where you could see the structural elements because they were kind of naked, and instead of concealing the structural elements with decorative forms, they pretty much stuck to the basics. And within these glass structures, not only did they have kind of terrariums, but it was or botanical gardens, that sort of thing, where part of the World's Fair was having a banana tree from Guatemala that in the Guatemala exhibit, you could keep it alive. You're bringing samples. They even had, usually when they couldn't figure out where this litter of orphans was from, they would like round them up. And this was another thing that oftentimes happens at the World's Fairs, is they would it's the Kenya exhibit. And they each come with like a major delegation. They sent like 500 men and and then there was just they'd build a circle of rocks, and that's where they would throw bread to the starving children. And eventually they put up a sign that said Filipino most of the time. Apparently, I think that was multiple fairs. And then at the end, that's one of the last exhibits. Everyone's everyone's kind of packed up and left town. And You don't smell like the cooking fires at night anymore. It's like, whose job is it to take the Filipino kids home? And they're like, I don't know, but if you were included in that group when it did get rescued or not, I mean, who knows? I don't mean to be making light of a specific ethnology.
Are these
sort of thing.
children part of the children that would be somehow the same children that were either involved with the incubator process of the World Fair or involved in the orphan trains to repopulate structures that were already here in the U.S.?
Could be one and the same. There could be an overlap there. I think that's it was Frank. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
And so again, not get off track from the glass. You were asking why the technology would get quote unquote lost real quick, and everyone's on a different
Or the structure.
frequency. Once you accepted that there was the type of magician and a scryer, and then a macaroni man. So the magician could use the hardware to send and receive the signals. The scryer could interpret what the signals were saying into symbols, and then the macaroni man was there to interpret the symbols because they might be in many languages. The person who's turning the sine wave or the ones and zeros into information, like a phonetic information or numeric information, might not be able to interpret. So then again, you have this 3-phase process of, and you think that there's just one frequency, and that's this monotheism. And there's a whole church with electromagnetically insulated building materials and copper wiring throughout it. And then on the top of the steeple is something that if you have 3 wraps of a copper wire versus 2, and then 2 wraps of zinc, and you'll pick up a different radio frequency essentially. And so within these glass structures, oftentimes in the architecture exhibit, outside of like the agriculture exhibit or industry exhibit, you would have these, is essentially in the basement of a lot of churches is a replacement for the steeple. And a really good architect and engineer and planner, when the structure becomes obsolete is when the thing at the top breaks, the antenna on top breaks. So how do you plan against that? Is that you build a spare one and put it in the basement. And so if the World's Fair
the reason
comes around
for the
and everyone
size?
gets the signal and it's still there, everyone brings it and puts it in. They like disassembled it piece by piece or moved it wholesale. And within these glass structures at the World's Fair that you were talking about, you would have these individual Tesla towers, or they would be radio receiving type. And so
could that be related to how in old churches, like Grant Morrison made a Batman comic about how all the energy, as we know, whether it be sing-songy energy or geometry, whatever, flows through the top of the church. Then you have an inversion of the church's steeple in the basement. And this is in the Batman story where kids were molested or whatever. And I've heard the inverted energy at the basement of a church allows you to sort of work against the God energy and do awful things or whatever. I was just making the point, could perhaps this kind of spare thing you're talking about have been in older churches in the basement? That's the reason for the inversion architecture, or that's just something unrelated?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is collaging that art together, right? Like you have to build these cities of what's left over. And after you've conquered a city, you've got pieces.
Yeah.
Well, have you guys heard of Arecibo, Seth? And we got American Time Machine. Don't want you guys to feel excluded. So Arecibo is a giant volcano. So it's a mountain with like a chunk missing from the top. And it's like a giant satellite dish facing the sky. And they actually turned it into a real satellite dish. So the idea of there being an aquifer, the notion of using both the words again and the idea. I wish I had a shot collar for myself, but the bedrock itself could have some sort of refractory or reflective characteristic that would make the signal be focused at the dome up above. And yes, you are correct in that kind of presumption. And perhaps it wasn't a spare part from the basement. But then it's amazing that they all tend to disappear because someone comes and buys them to bring them home and either reverse engineer them or set themselves up. Architecture calls it spoilia, when you build something out of a bunch of. There were whole books about how to take Roman carvings that were meant for a mantelpiece that was like 40 feet wide and 10 feet tall, and scale it down to a residential size of, just like 10 feet by 5 feet, 5 feet or something, and then keeping the details and like where to cut the larger carvings so that when you reassemble it, it still looks like a somewhat cohesive design. And so that's what we were doing.
I'm
We
sorry,
wonder where all the great ancient carvings are, is, people's fireplaces and bedrooms and parlor rooms.
Yeah, for sure. I cut you off, man, with that church inversion idea. I'm sorry if you knew where your place was.
Well, I don't know. We were just riffing on a theme there of the world's
For sure.
fairs. And so I think before I got on, they were having intelligent discussions about philosophy and epistemology. And I have a couple fun vocab words. we have, I don't know. Turn the conversation over to anyone else, though, if you want to suggest other. There's more giant redwood trees in the UK than in California. Anybody? Okay, here's another fun one. Did you know that the United States purchase of Alaska was a way to launder money that we owed the Russians for showing up during our civil war and guarding our ports, and that it still took like a couple of years for the money to get approved through Congress. And then even when they did, the $7.2 million showed up like 3 months later in Russia eventually, and it was $165,000 short of, so it was like 7.02 million. So nowadays,
Dude, I don't know what kind of
there's
chaos
fees and
this is,
everything,
but you've destroyed the system. Like the glitches in the matrix are coming everywhere. Wow. Seth's camera's broken. Oh no, you're back, Frank. Okay, I'll relax. I was like, what happened? Everything just like went to chaos.
I'm sorry, I got a call, so I had to click it off. Le phone.
We're at the 2 hour
Next
mark
time.
anyway. I was wondering. I wanted to make sure that Paranoid American. Oh my God, not again! I can't believe it every single time. My friend Kurt Guard, the American Time Machine.
Hi.
What do you think? Your microphone got so quiet.
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay, cool. Say stuff.
What's up?
I don't know. What do you think about the Kate conspiracy, maybe? Or like, what do you think? I don't know. The founding trains. That seems like a thing that we're talking about. What do you think about America? This idea of built culture, any of that stuff, or whatever. How about like purgatory of emotions and intellectual limbo, wisdom and agency?
I can't. If that's like a reference, I might have missed that part of the discussion. Wisdom and agency, but no, I think. I didn't mention anything about sexual stuff. We talked about sexual stuff. Well, mate selection. Yeah, I don't know. I think civilization has changed a lot of our sexual selection, like 10,000 years of it, for better or for worse. But there's a whole other discussion you could have about that. And I think there's a
George Carlin said it used to be called "I fuck as far as I can walk." You remember he had a whole bit on. Like when you look in certain places, how everyone doesn't look like the same is the same, but the way that we kind of differentiated in certain ways, it was probably as you would fuck as far as you can walk, and then sometimes there was endogamy in there where you would like, either or the opposite thereof. But we lost Seth when it comes to. I feel like
back soon. If his camera broke, he's trying to fix it. Yeah, it was not your fault. I know I want to be narcissistic and think everything's my fault, but it's really just his.
I like to think that Seth is really just putting us all on, and he has such an active sex life that his lower back is always hurting. But that's not really a funny joke because I know he does have.
It's true though. It'd be good.
Great sex life.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know. Well, we're like, I kind of, I mean, okay. Do you guys want to go longer, or because we're at 2 hours, usually we can stop it. We could keep going if you wanted to keep going, because you guys because Frank just joined. Oh God, no, he's back. Frank, this is too much chaos. Frank, are we staying on, or is your camera's breaking and starting again? Good.
Oh, I'm down, man. I don't know if that's me because like my camera's consistent. Like I'm looking at you guys and I'm seeing the black and the freak out. It's not me. I don't think.
Yeah. Well, what if we do a show at like 6 tonight? We can do another show, and like, are you around? Are you able to come do that?
I'm down, man, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. So then we can do a secondary one. I
Cool.
want to take a second to show American Time Machine's music, which earlier I tried to show, but he just left. So I'm going to show it again. This is American Time Machine. This is what it feels like to be an American Time Machine. It's pretty good. Actually, you know what I can do? I just learned how to do this. You go here, you push that, and then you click there, and then watch this. Boom. It'll probably take.
It's great to be a cash machine. The indie days.
If I'm
Before-
not careful, it'll charge me
Before
money.
time zones, which we think are confusing today, people were on different calendars in different areas, right? And so a time traveler was just someone who showed up and thought it was the 3rd of June when there it was actually the 7th of June, and it wasn't a Tuesday, it was a Friday. Because as far as they knew, they didn't skip any days. No days off.
This album's wild. Yeah, so you gotta listen to Kaleidoscope and the title song from Kaleidoscope. Make sure you go to American Time Machine. You guys maybe need a Canadian Time Machine or Paranoid Canadian. I'll just
Well,
start
the
calling it
European one at
Paranoid
least gives you
Canadian.
vacation, doesn't it? I mean, the American
I
time
like that.
machine, I mean, with the cities that never sleep, but the people that the
Where's
echoes
the
of our society. They say, yeah. So have you, as far as just fun, non-pseudo history things, there was an earthquake, and then that door appeared suddenly, and what was just a giant homogeneous rock face with some pretty funky stuff around it opened up a secret passageway, not in such a way where it just kind of cracked and revealed a hidden passageway, but there was a chamber with like a square cut door. So all the way at the beginning is when they show the square cut door, and there was like a lingam inside. So it begs the question, hey, geologists, I thought you said that was a natural rock formation for like all of recorded history, but now what do you say about it? Because is it geopolymer or not, guys? And this is like one of these, a lot of interesting things go, and it's a little flash in the pan news item. Will Smith and Men in Black says sometimes you read the National Enquirer because every now and then that's where the real truth is. Well, I think it's our job not only to find the mainstream or the main threads to pull at to unwind some of the narrative that's in place, but individual items like this are significant and could lead to, because archaeology in and of itself is not a very disciplined science. It is the incorporation of expertise from many different fields of science that are more quantitative and less qualitative. And this is an instance where if there's a question about geopolymer or not, there's a prime example where, because Moroni, the statue on top of the LDS church in Utah, dropped its trumpet when there was like a 5.4 earthquake. And some people say they were actually blasting and they were building underground chambers. But Napoleon was quoted as saying, great men are meteors meant to burn in times of disturbance, essentially. And so there were, on the top of these domes, there were oftentimes a harp. You know, the statues were holding something that had a wire across it. And when the electromagnetic system was getting overloaded, the main fuse, when it blew, was a wire in the statue's hand up above that would glow for a few seconds and then spark out. So when they say great men are meteors, meteors used to be a way to refer to weather sensing technology, not as something flying through the air. So great men are meteors meant to burn in times of disturbance. And so Moroni dropping his trumpet could have been a type of seismic detector. And if someone showed up and the church was abandoned for 10 years and they were trying to figure out why, they would go check a whole bunch of sensors. And one of the sensors they could check was there was an earthquake at a certain point. And I bet you there was probably some sort of clock, a manual clock that started ticking as soon as he dropped that. So that's a much more modern recreation of the phenomenon that we saw there. And again, I'm wrapping up the stream, but again, this holographic thing where overlooked.
It's making you all mumbly. I was hoping that you could still talk and like it wouldn't make you mumbly. Keep trying.
I can put marbles in my mouth.
Eh.
Had anyone else heard about that doorway that was exposed? And what do you guys think? Do you call them what?
It's almost like they think this is good, as if